Welcome to the League of Legends Champions Spotlight, featuring
Skarner, the Crystal Vanguard.
Skarner is what I'd like to call a vintage champion. Being released back on August 9th of 2011, he came out with a balanced win rate, and although he did have some spikes and drops, he stayed relatively steady, sitting at almost a 50% win rate across the board. He received a rework on patch 5.16 on August 20th of 2015 and is due for one in 2023. Let's say this right off the bat. 50% win rate is perfectly acceptable if you're looking to climb, and I'm sure people will be able to find success with him in his games. But in the year 2023, with champions being created with Riot's 200 years of experience, is that really enough? I'm here to look at the question, is Skarner really viable in Season 13?
Oh man.
There are a lot of factors that make a champion viable. Let's talk about the strengths of Skarner first, and then we'll go into the cons.
Oh, we got the soul.
One of the biggest advantages that he has is Impale, his ultimate ability. This ability is able to be used as a point-and-click suppress and can easily incapacitate and displace the enemy team's most important champion. He can easily turn around a team fight, and for this reason he is also used as a counterpick to hyper-mobile champions in pro play. He also has the ability to stun a champion with his E, Fracture, further increasing the potential CC duration. Skarner, although he doesn't look like it, his base stat and scaling is some of the highest in the game. This will usually mean that without any items or abilities, Skarner is able to handle fighting off most champions with no problem. Excluding HP scaling, which he ends up being around 108th place, just above Jinx and Syndra, his armor scaling puts him at number 17, his MR scaling puts him tied at 5th, and his AD scaling puts him at 6th at level 18. His base scaling numbers are also good, usually putting him in the top 30 in all of these categories as well. There's also something to be said about his mana situation. Especially in his passive crystal area, he will almost never run out of mana. This is a combination of his low mana cost abilities, as well as his high mana regeneration his passive gives him. I have also played him top lane as well, where his crystals are not, and he is still able to spam all of his abilities without any fear of running low on mana. With all that being said, let's move on to the cons of picking Skarner.
Oh my god.
We spoke earlier about his stat scaling, but now let's talk about his ability scaling. While his stats on a base level seem to be relatively high, his abilities seem to be very low. If you take a look at his Q ability, Crystal Slash, you notice that while it does deal percent health damage, it also only has a 20% AD scaling after that. It seems relatively fine for ability on a 2.5 second cooldown, but when you do compare it to an ability like Hecarim's Q, which is extremely similar, you can see how it really falls short. At 5th level, his ability will deal 3% of the target's health as damage. To meet the same threshold that Hecarim has, the enemy champion will need to have around 5,000 HP to reach the same base 160 damage on the Hecarim Q. Being his primary damaging ability, this does affect Skarner's total damage output, making it very hard to break 20k damage even in a potentially long game. With his low base ability damage, Skarner does rely on items to help supplement the damage that he's able to do. That being said, you will generally have two build options for him. One is to build Bruiser to combat his lack of damage and try and have item passives help with your total damage output. I was able to do this in a game, and while it worked well early, when we got further into the game, I wasn't able to do much because I would be bursted down before I could do any damage to the enemy team. Option 2 is to go full tank and take damage out of the equation and really work on displacing the enemy carries. While he does work well doing this, as we discussed before, it can be difficult because Skarner really doesn't have any sort of gap closing ability. This does make you rely on summoner spells to get in close, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it is something to keep in mind. Lastly, I wanted to talk about his passive. While this does make farming in the jungle and potential rivers fights quite good sometimes, I would say that about half the time you don't actually have a passive. You really need to have extreme map control to really have all your crystals active at the same time, and it only takes about 2 seconds to remove that passive and decrease your power in a fight.
What?
If you are contesting a Dragon or Baron from the enemy team, more often than not you won't have a passive for that fight. It also affects your ganking ability because you will never have that ability in lane.
Oh my god, what?
If you are enjoying the content so far, please feel free to hit the subscribe button, it really does help. And if you do have any suggestions on other champions you'd like me to do, please feel free to post them in the comments below. I came into researching this video thinking I knew exactly what I would say, and I came out thinking something else. In my opinion, Skarner is still viable in Season 13. He may not have the highest win rate percentages, but he is able to do his job and do it well. If you are going to play him, I would recommend that tank build over the bruiser build, as it helps you do what you need to do to help your team win. I hope that the remake that comes out will fix some of the cons we discussed earlier, especially his passive. I think if that's fixed, then he will be a better champion overall. I hope you enjoyed a deep dive. If you agree or disagree, let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you again soon.
Never break, always fight, never quit, do it right, play the game, win it life, have no shame, there's no time, feel the pain, live the grind, I could change, in my mind, pick a lane, commit and climb, the only way to win it life.